All characters in the story are over 18 years old. When my parents informed me that we were going to the countryside, I was delighted. I enjoyed spending time away from the city, the urban bustle, polluted smoggy air, and traffic. One night, I took our car to go local. This marked my first experience driving in the city. Although I did receive a stern talking to from my father afterward, the walk was invigorating. I even missed the carefree days a little. I was most proud of our house, or rather, I would even say a full-fledged mansion. Imagine walking past the wooden houses of your neighbors to your hefty two-story brick monastery. It was a great time, and so much water has flowed since then. It's like we didn't live either. It all started in this village, and everything will end in this village. My parents, Rebecca and Jack, are very successful people. When my father was 20 and my mother was 18, they had me, James. My father is a businessman later on. My mother transitioned into a prominent position in the legal sector, and she currently serves as the head of our company. She occupies the main office and oversees operations. I chose to pursue a career in law, following in my parents' footsteps. As you can imagine, our family is quite well off. We were well provided for, yet something was still missing from our family. It was a minor detail that would have completed our family's structure. I believe that the absence of love was the underlying cause of the dysfunction within our family. My father is not a devoted family man, naturally. He provided for us and was there when needed, but I couldn't comprehend how it all happened. The fact is that my father was unfaithful. I knew this because he told me himself when I grew up, and my mother knew too. As time passed, I turned 18, left my parents' home, and went on my own. I embarked on a journey, and upon my departure, my parents promptly initiated divorce proceedings. They had raised me since childhood, and I had become accustomed to the situation. I recognized that it was inevitable. The two successful individuals parted ways, and the divorce was finalized. My parents' divorce was amicable, and they handled it discreetly. They had both achieved success in their respective careers, and my father chose to relocate to the capital, while my mother chose to remain in the village. I would have likely made a similar decision. The opportunity to live in a clean, airy home with a large property, located just 15 minutes from the city, was too good to pass up. After graduating, I secured a position as an assistant to a successful entrepreneur, and the mother of she extended an invitation for me to visit her office, but I was unable to reach her due to the extensive and highly skilled legal staff she had at her disposal. I am confident in my abilities and intelligence, and I am not lacking in self-assurance. However, I do not consider myself to be a natural leader. I believe that I have a natural aptitude for teamwork and collaboration. Course extended an invitation to me to visit her office, but I am unable to reach her due to the high number of skilled and confident lawyers on her staff. I am confident in my abilities, I am a smart individual. However, I do not consider myself a natural leader. I excel at working with others and am proficient in teamwork. At the age of 21, I married my girlfriend, Amanda, who was in the same group as me. I fell in love with her at first sight. She is petite, blonde, cute, and has brown eyes. At the age of 23, our daughter Jessica was born. We lived in our spacious apartment in the city center, and my mother was a 15. At the age of 21, I married my girlfriend, Amanda, who was in the same group at university. I fell in love with her at first sight. She was petite, blonde, cute, and had brown eyes. At the age of 23, our daughter, Jessica, was born. We lived in our spacious apartment in the city center, and my mother was a 15-minute drive away. Everything was going great, and even my father came to see my granddaughter. Mom visited us from time to time, if possible. We would go to her. There's also no problem with Amanda. I'm 28 years old now. Amanda and I were going to the village for Mom's birthday. We left Jessica with Amanda's mom, and soon, we were on our way to the celebration. We barely parked at our family home. We got out of the car. It's going to be the evening was proceeding smoothly. My mother, who is 46, was met at the threshold of the house by my father. She had just celebrated her birthday, and judging by the number of cars here, it was clear that a large number of guests had gathered. My mother always paid close attention to her appearance, and I was always surprised that she didn't seem to do sports or go on diets. She was in excellent shape, with brown, wavy hair and a radiant smile. We exchanged some pleasantries and headed for the table. It was evident that my mother maintained her residence meticulously, as evidenced by the presence of a well-lit and well-appointed basement. Despite her youth, she had already reached the age of 46. I observed that her physical appearance was in line with the conventional standards of beauty. I noticed that she did not engage in sports or strict diets, yet her physique was nonetheless defined. Her brown, wavy hair was glossy, and she possessed a radiant smile. We exchanged pleasantries and proceeded to the dining table. It was gratifying to witness that my mother had preserved the house in pristine condition, ensuring it remained clean and comfortable. The furniture, although not new, appeared as if it were. Apart from the recent addition of new household appliances, the second floor remained unaltered. On the ground floor, my mother's bedroom and a bathroom were situated. The kitchen, which was spacious, accommodated all the guests. There was an additional bathroom and a living room. It is evident that my mother maintains the house in a well-kept and inviting state. The furniture, with the exception of new appliances, appears to be my own age, and the second floor remains unaltered from its previous state. On the ground floor, there is my mother's bedroom, complete with an attached bathroom. There is also a spacious kitchen, where guests are typically accommodated, along with an additional bathroom and a living room. Upon arrival, I was greeted by several individuals, and we engaged in conversation over a few glasses of whiskey. I proceeded to my den, where I enjoyed another glass of the aforementioned beverage. The basement level is similar to the ground floor, with a spacious sofa in front of a plasma billiard table and a sizable bed with a neon red sign on the wall that illuminates the majority of the room. It is a common adolescent fantasy to possess such a space. I greeted several acquaintances, and we engaged in conversation over a few glasses of whiskey. I proceeded to my den, where I consumed another glass of the aforementioned beverage. I retired to the basement, which was similar to the ground floor. This was my residence, a spacious sofa in front of the plasma TV, a billiards table, and a large bed with a neon red sign on the wall that illuminated most of the room. What teenager has not dreamed of such a setting? Tell me an adult's dream. I'm sure. I went downstairs and took a sip from my glass. I heard my mother's voice from behind. Looking at her, I realized that she was already quite tipsy. Yes, to recall the past, so to speak, and there is a lot to remember. She came up from the side. I remember how I always scolded you for that sign. Looking at her, I keep thinking of you. Do you come to my room often? Yes, sometimes I go down to watch TV. I would like to take a moment to discuss the events that transpired earlier. I would like to inquire as to your current location. I would like to request that you please make your way to the guests area. I would like to mention that the guests are scheduled to be departing in the near future. My father appeared on the stairs at that moment, which immediately dispelled my thoughts and served as the reason for the separation of my mother's hugs. It was already night. Only the most persistent remained. Half of the guests had already left, and only me, my father, Amanda, and a couple of my mother's friends were left. Everyone was already quite intoxicated, except I recall the previous circumstances. What is the purpose of your presence here? I will depart with the guests. Everyone will be departing shortly. My father appeared on the stairs, which immediately dispelled my thoughts and resulted in the separation of my mother's hugs. It was already night. Only the most persistent remained, half of the guests had already departed. Only me, my father, Amanda, and a couple of her friends remained. Everyone was already quite intoxicated, except for my father and Amanda. Consequently, it is not surprising that for my mother and me, the festivities continued while everyone was seated at the table. My mother and I decided to warm up a little to the music. I was very surprised by her zeal, such energy would be envied by young girls. I must admit that I was openly looking at my mother. I don't know how our dance appeared from the outside, but I was pleased. Besides, who would think anything of us? Amanda and I were enjoying ourselves, and the festivities continued uninterrupted. My mother and I decided to dance, and I was impressed by her energy. I must admit that I was openly looking at my mother. I don't know how our dance looked from the outside, but I was pleased. Besides, who would think anything of us? We are mother and son, after all. Thoughts began to slip through his foggy head. No matter how hard I tried to drive them away, it turned out badly. Basically, it was the fact that my wife was in the immediate vicinity of us. However, all good things come to an end. So who should I take home? Dad asked when the song ended, causing Mom and me to pull away from each other. The two remaining men accepted the offer without hesitation. Well, shall we? After giving it some thought, I decided to accept the offer. We go? Amanda asked me as she came up to me. Despite the fact that everyone was going to leave with a glass in her hands, I couldn't take my eyes off my mom. She smoothly wriggled to the Cal song playing after the previous one. James, are we going? I broke away from my mom for a while and found the strength to answer. Listen, can we stay the night? More, you have enough, and even more. She lowered her voice to a whisper. Amanda inquired as she approached, her eyes fixed intently on her mother. Despite the imminent departure of everyone present, she maintained her focus on her mother, who gracefully extricated herself from her chair and offered a glass to each person. She then transitioned to the subsequent song, which was followed by James's question, Amanda, we leaving? Breaking away from her mother momentarily, I found the fortitude to respond, listen, can we stay the night? I have no desire to stay in your mother's house. Don't misunderstand me, an inner voice urged me to stay. It's like an inner voice. Come on. I rarely see my mother, and I probably stayed overnight a century ago. What are your plans? My father approached us. I want to stay. I objected and immediately called out to my mother. Mom, can I stay with you? She abruptly regained her composure and calmly replied, of course, the whole. I don't want to stay in my mother's house. I've had a feeling that I should leave. It's an inner voice, you know? I don't see my mother that often, and the last time I stayed overnight was probably 100 years ago. What are your plans? My father approached us. I want to stay. I objected and immediately called out to my mother. Mom, can I stay with you? She came to her senses abruptly and calmly replied, of course, the whole house is at your disposal. I looked at Amanda. If you want, your father will take you, of course. Let's go. My father supported me. Amanda thought for a moment, rolled her eyes, and answered, okay, let's stay. Well, that's great. As you wish, let's go. Guys, he shouted to the remaining ones, and those two got up from their chairs. The night was gaining momentum. It took another hour or so. Amanda was bored at the table on the house is at your disposal. Well, I looked at Amanda. If you want, your father will take you, of course. Let me go, my father supported me. Amanda thought for a moment, rolled her eyes, and answered, okay, let's stay. Well, that's great. As you wish, let me go. Guys, he shouted to the remaining ones, and those two got up from their chairs. The night was gaining momentum. It took another hour or so, and Amanda was bored at the table on the phone. My mom and I continued to have fun, pretty drunk. We continued to dance. Amanda, what are you talking about? Come to us. I decided to amuse my wife. Thanks, but I've had enough. I'm going to take a shower and go to bed. Thanks for the evening. Everything was great. She turned to me and my mother. Well, we'll sit down for a while. Amanda nodded and went up the stairs to the guest bedroom. Well, madam, have you had enough, or other years? I inquired of my mother, in a light-hearted manner, have you had enough, or other years taking their toll? She responded with a playful grin, you better watch yourself, young man. I proposed, let's head down to my room and continue the fun there, so Amanda doesn't get in the way of the music. Come on, I don't mind, she replied. We proceeded to the basement, where we enjoyed the remainder of the alcohol and snacks. The festivities continued with lively music and subdued lighting. We engaged in some light-hearted dancing. "Are you tired?" I inquired of Amanda. I inquired humorously of my mother. "You better watch yourself, young man." She responded with a smile. Then I suggested that we proceed to my room to continue the activity, so that Amanda would not disrupt the music. "Come on, I don't mind," I replied. We proceeded with the remaining alcohol and snacks, and made our way down to the basement. The activity continued with lively music and subdued lighting. We engaged in movement within the dance, and I inquired playfully, "Have you grown tired?" She replied joyfully, "When I drink, I always feel the urge to move around." I responded, "I haven't danced like this in a long time." "How long has it been?" "Probably since my youth." "Well, you'll give the young ones a head start." "A purely male opinion," she added with a playful smile. "I am pleased," I replied. She turned her back to me playfully and said, "How long have I been waiting for this?" The music had long since changed to another one, but we continued dancing. I inquired playfully, "Have you ever danced to this song before?" "I feel like I haven't danced to anything like it in a long time. It's been quite some time, since my youth, actually." "You'll give the young ones a head start." "A purely male opinion." "I am pleased." She smiled playfully and turned her back to me. "How long have I been waiting for this?" The music had long since changed to another one, but we still continued at the same pace. We were already moving without paying attention to the song. I didn't understand what we were doing, but I couldn't stop. I'm not familiar with such dances. We danced like that for a few more minutes, but then the most embarrassing moment in my life happened. We got too carried away dancing and made love. I couldn't believe it. At that time, Amanda was sleeping in another room. I don't remember exactly how long. We were moving at the same pace without paying attention to the song. I was perplexed, but I couldn't stop. I was not familiar with such dances. We danced like that for a few more minutes, but then the most embarrassing moment in my life happened. We got too carried away dancing and made love. I couldn't believe it. At that time, Amanda was sleeping in another room. I don't remember exactly how long. It lasted. Shame. The first feeling that came over me was shame. Alcohol no longer clouded my mind, and the barriers of moral principles began to rise again instantly. "James, wake up." I opened my eyes and jumped up abruptly. My wife looked at me with puzzled eyes. "What are you doing?" "What is it?" she asked. I felt a sense of embarrassment wash over me. The alcohol no longer had the same effect on me, and my moral principles began to return. "James, wake up." I opened my eyes and jumped up abruptly. My wife looked at me with a puzzled expression. "What are you doing?" "What is it?" she asked. I looked around the room, but I couldn't find any evidence of what had happened with my mother. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but after sniffing around, I realized he was sleeping in his room upstairs. "What's that smell, and why did you decide to sleep here?" Amanda answered and asked, "What have you been doing?" I was perplexed. "Where is Mom?" I inquired. I surveyed the room, but it remained undisturbed. Initially, I thought I was dreaming, but after inspecting the sleeping area upstairs and detecting an unfamiliar scent, I understood that it was real. I asked, "What have you been doing here?" "Me, God, what about us?" I was struck by a sudden realization. I was prepared to fail. "Okay, let's go take a shower and get ready. We'll have to pick up Jessica for Mom." I took a quick shower, gathered my things, and headed out to the kitchen. To my surprise, I did not notice her having had a hasty. I was waiting for my mother to join us, but when about half an hour had passed, I suggested we leave without disturbing her. "We will call her Amanda," I said. I was rushing between two fires. On the one hand, I wanted to leave as soon as possible, and on the other hand, I wanted to see my mother, but I was waiting for my mother to join us for breakfast, but after about half an hour, I decided to go since she was still sleeping. Amanda suggested that I was rushing between two fires. On the one hand, I wanted to leave as soon as possible, but on the other hand, I wanted to see my mother. However, the first one still took off. 10 minutes later, we left the village. 2 weeks later, my relationship with my mother became very bad. We couldn't be in the same room together, and as soon as I tried to start a conversation about that night, Mom just got mad and almost sent me away. Over the course of the month, we met less and less. 3 months later, we learned that my mother had put the house up for sale and gone away without telling us. 10 minutes later, we left the village. 2 weeks later, my relationship with my mother had deteriorated to the point that we could no longer spend time together. As soon as I tried to discuss the events of that night, she became upset and almost sent me away. Over the course of the next month, we met less often, and our relationship had become completely estranged. The events of the night of July 16th, 22nd, had created a significant rift between us. At each meeting, we were tormented by a sense of shame and reproach. All attempts at conversation were unsuccessful. Typically, we saw each other only a couple of times a month. Months later, we met for dinner at a family gathering in the village, but our conversation was brief. Suddenly, my mother felt unwell. She turned pale and ran to the bathroom, covering her mouth with her hand. About 3 months later, we learned that my mother had put the house up for sale and had gone somewhere without saying a word to anyone. I continue to grapple with feelings of guilt and shame. It is unfortunate that the events that transpired ultimately led to the deterioration of the mother-son relationship. The night of July 16th, the 22nd year, will forever be etched in my memory as both the pinnacle and nadir of my life.